really shaping up to be one of the hottest contested races in the nation right now for NY22.
Right.
What do you expect now that Trump has thrown his hat into this race and like support for Tenney? What do you think is going to happen for this race moving forward?
Well, I think generally what you see when the president gets on board, when President Trump gets on board with a campaign, he generally follows it up, and so I think you'll see his support continuing. I think that'll certainly circle up the support even more so for Mr. Brindisi, and I think if he wasn't going to get a big name to come in, I think he probably will now. I think you'll see,
I'll agree with you on that one.
So I think that's good for you guys in the media, because I think you'll have probably another big event like this to go on. So I think, and what it does really from both perspectives is it focuses national money on the campaign, which, in an election like this, when I ran the first time in 2006, Ray Meyer and I, we each raised $2 million, and they probably, both sides put in $2 million. So in a race like that, there were $8 million, and that was over 10 years ago. So I think you might very likely see $10 million on this race. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Now, you were a representative from 2007 until 2011. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney also looking for that second term now. What's the difference when you're looking for that freshman seat versus now she's looking for a re-election?
For me, it was a little different on the second seat, because the second year when I ran, it was a very strong Democratic year, so everyone was really not as excited. They were worrying about trying to increase the numbers in the Senate. They weren't as excited about the House. I think what you'll see, so to that point, there wasn't as much enthusiasm in my re-election as there was in the first year when the Democrats took the House. What I think you're seeing, though, for Congresswoman Tenney is there is a lot of enthusiasm. They're very concerned about losing this seat. This is a seat there's a lot of focus on, so they will really bring a lot of support in the national Republicans to support Claudia, and I think the Democrats will see this as a bellwether seat, and they'll really pour the resources in to support Mr. Brindisi. So I think we're in for a lot of TV time, a lot of ads, and a lot of fun, a fun campaign.
Well, as always, we appreciate your expertise on this. We actually have our Washington correspondent, Mark Meredith, so I'm going to keep you here with me. We're going to allow him to join the conversation. Hi, Mark. Hope you're having a good evening. We're just talking about what the influence these national committees can actually have on a campaign and what it does to a local staff once they get involved. What is your take? You know President Trump pretty well now, and you've seen him, the character behind the camera, when he's like that, and when the cameras are off. What's he like? Is it the same person?
Well, Angie, behind the camera, from what I've seen, whether it be meetings in the Oval Office or at dinners, the president is very much like he appears on television, kind of that same persona, a lot of the same talking points. But to your first question right there, what happens when you bring the president, the White House, the power of the White House or a national committee into a race? It's going to be what we're talking about right now. You're talking about massive media coverage. You're going to be seeing the president's motorcade, Air Force One. These are all visual events that are designed to get voters excited about a particular candidate, even if they may not be feeling particularly excited about the president or any of his policies that may be in place at the time. So as we were talking about earlier, the president up in New York for the defense authorization bill, but also getting a chance to slide in some of these political events. This is by no mistake. The White House tries to plan their calendar like this to maximize the president's time while he's on the ground in a battleground place like we're talking about there in upstate New York. We've also seen the president make sure to make use of one of his favorite tools, and that's Twitter. I just saw an alert a few minutes ago that the president was doing an endorsement for another candidate, and this is what he's been doing. He's been trying to drum up the support online, and then depending on how those results will go, the president may go out to visit one of these campaign fundraisers or even a rally in person. He's done it in Florida. The vice president's going to be hitting the road in Ohio this week. Angie, the White House likes to keep this president moving, and in campaign events, also fundraisers, just like the one we're seeing tonight.
Yes, Mark, he definitely had some time in the motorcade to send a couple tweets out there, so we'll have to check on that. What Mark said, is that something you would agree on with the national committees really stepping in on the local staff?
Yes, absolutely, and I think, again, as a local candidate, you're excited because that means that the big donors in California, big donors in Chicago and New York City, they see a race, it's front and center, they realize you're in a tough campaign, and they have X amount of money that they're going to give out, and hopefully you are one of the recipients of the money that they're going to give out. But to the one other additional point that I think is so important, I mentioned it earlier, is for the people that aren't committed, they look at a president coming in and then the local representative, and they say, you know, that local representative must have clout with that president. That means if we need something in our area, they have the ear of the president. And I think that's sort of the intangible that you see, that I think people that are unaligned, that aren't Democrat, aren't Republican, sort of look at what's good for the area, look at a factor like that, and I think that's a factor as well. That's the, you know, the one you can't really measure.
It's a huge thing, absolutely. It adds a lot of juice to this campaign. Again, we spoke about how it's already so full of electric that anything more might just set it over the top. Mark, I want to start with you. What is having a president, adding to this to your campaign, having the endorsement, what does that do for this candidate?
Well, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. It can be a double-edged sword, if you will, and that's only because not only when you bring the national spotlight, that also means more pressure for that candidate to perform well. We've seen this time and time again, that after a candidate the president may endorse loses in his or her seat, then there's a lot of questions about whether or not the president's attention hurt or help them at the ballot box. And so it's a gamble here. And there's going to certainly be some people that will say, well, always having the White House's support is a good thing. And for the most part, I would say I would agree, because not only do you bring those national resources, but it's just as the congressman mentioned, it shows that this person, if they are brought into office or reelected for that matter, that they will have the ear of the president. But the White House doesn't forget this. This is not short-term memory. They do expect that person, once he or she is elected or reelected, to then owe the White House these kind of favors once they return or enter Congress. So you can imagine that this is still a long shot for a lot of people, because they're going to make sure that not only do they have the president's ear, but they also want to make sure they have the president's money, as the congressman was just saying. A lot of this has to do with what they can do to drum up this support, stand out in a race. What's going to be different in my campaign versus my opponents? And this is something you're going to get coming down the steps of Air Force One or greeting the president at Marine One, seeing those autographs being signed there in a ballroom of a hotel. These kind of visuals do matter in campaign ads. They'll matter in digital ads. And this is something that candidates know a lot about when it comes to these races. And the White House makes sure to put their candidate, the president for that matter, front and center.
Mark, I completely agree with you there when you said it's a double-edged sword. A big form of backlash that Congresswoman Claudia Tenney is getting is the price tag of this fundraiser tonight. It's $1,000 to get in, and as we've seen, the Trump support base, they're not the financial elite. What do you feel about that ticket price? Do you think it's something that includes her district?
Well, you know, that's something that you hear regardless, every campaign, you know, people always talk about that, oh, this is a big ticket. And, you know, from Mr. Brindisi's perspective, you know, he's saying, hey, you know, mine is a grassroots campaign, and that's sort of the way you play off on it. But you always hear that. People are always going to say it, but fact of the matter is Claudia Tenney has to raise at least $2 million, and it's not an easy number to get to when you're from a district like ours. You know, it's not a Manhattan or a Los Angeles or a Hollywood district where there's a lot of money. So you have to pick up that money, and if, you know, some people talk about it, it's unfortunate, but you need to do it. So there's no choice. It's something that if she has the opportunity, she's going to do. And if Mr. Brindisi has the opportunity, I'm sure he will do as well. That
big $2 million mark. Mark, I actually want your opinion on this as well. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, again, the tickets for her fundraiser tonight, $1,000 to get in. The support base of this campaign and of the Trump administration, they're not the financial elite. How can people charge this to get into an event to support someone that they want to back?
Well, I hate to say it, but $1,000 in politics is really not a whole lot of money. Yes, of course it is for me and for you and for most of our audience. $1,000 certainly would be a lot of money. But for the people that realize that they have a lot on the line, whether or not they support a candidate, whether or not they can have the ear of that candidate whenever he or she is in Congress, $1,000 can pay off 10 times that amount. So it's also important to make sure that you stand out in front of that congressman who's running for office. You want to make sure that they know that you are an original supporter, that you were there when you needed them most. So for $1,000, if I can say down the line that I need to make sure that my issue or what I care about gets the attention of a member of Congress, $1,000 for some of those interest groups will not be a lot of money. But of course, I don't want to sound crazy. $1,000, yes, that is a lot of money for a plated dinner. But let's make no mistake, this is not about the bread or the steak that'll be served in that hotel ballroom. This is all about the chance to have influence, not only with the congressional candidate, but with the President of the United States as well. We live in a social media world. That chance to snap a selfie there with the President of the United States, that will go viral. That'll be something that other people will be able to use in their issues campaign, whether it could be businesses or individuals. This is something that can go a long way after just tonight. Angie?
It's one of those things as well. It's the price tag that brought a lot of backlash, but it was President Trump himself. We saw the warm welcome at Griffiths, which people knew Air Force One was going to stop there. They wanted that moment. But there are also a lot of protesters. This was a heavily Trump-supported district when it came to the election. Why do you think things have changed?
I don't know. You know, that's a really good question, and I think about that a lot. I'm not sure if they have changed. You know, we don't really know what the polling says right now. You know, you get a lot of skewed polling from both sides. I'm not sure how popular President Trump is in our district right now. He did very well in the last election, and his numbers may very well be the same or pretty close to it. So it's pretty hard to know exactly what his popularity is. No matter where a president goes, no matter how popular he or she is, they're going to get protesters. I mean, that's the nature of it. So I don't think we really know exactly, you know, what his popularity is. But, you know, to Mark's point, and I think it's a very good one, when you see fundraisers like this at $1,000, in our area, $1,000 is just, you know, drop your jaw over. But in Washington, that's not a huge amount of money. So the people that can afford it, who would love to get the ear of the president or like to meet the president, it's not a lot of money. You don't need a lot of supporters at $1,000 a ticket. It's not like a $25, you know, a ticket fundraiser. You don't need a whole lot of them.
Just to have him for 5 minutes, some people are just so excited that he's come back to Central New York. The last time we saw him, he was a candidate, but linking himself to this campaign now, to Tenney. Mark, I want your opinion on this. What do you think this is going to do for this congressional race that is already just picking up so much steam here back in the Mohawk Valley and over in the Capitol where you are?
Well, Angie, I also want to bring up another point that I think you were also trying to harp on, that, you know, this White House is trying to make it clear that they don't see themselves as part of the financial elite that they were talking about during the 2016 campaign. And that's why we've seen the White House also do these free campaign rallies. This is still something, I shouldn't say at the White House, but the President's Re-election Committee still doing these campaign rallies where they'll get an airplane hangar and they'll fill it with 5 to 10 to 15,000 people. The President's going to be going down to West Virginia tomorrow night, and he's going to be doing something just like that we've seen happen in the past. And those tickets are free. So if you wanted to bring up the point that maybe the President is you know, asking for $1,000 tonight, if you want to have dinner to be in that ballroom, tomorrow he's going to be doing an audience, a speech where he's going to go on for about an hour, and that would be open to the general public. So you have to remember that there is that contrast there. And then to your other question, what does this mean for the race? Well, it certainly energizes it. Look, we're talking about it right now. We're going to have cameras all over the place across the New York area as the president is in your backyard, because this is whole by design. The White House wants attention. They want people focused on this race, this candidate. They want to see what's going to happen next, and they believe by putting the president up there or the vice president, anybody else from the administration that can be kind of a lightning rod, they'll certainly be able to see how voters react to that as well. There will be instant polling within just a couple of days, if not just a couple of hours. Angie?
We are definitely excited to see those numbers and what an impact it has. Even the announcement that President Trump was coming, it gauged such a response from this community. And Mark, I want to thank you for being with us tonight all the way from Washington, D.C. It was a pleasure speaking with you. You gave us great insight. Along with you, Mike Arcuri, thank you so much. You've helped us so much to understand what it really takes to go through a congressional race like this. And I want to learn more about what it was like for you, because as